Good morning still, everyone. My name is Mark Salvo. I'm with Oregon Natural Desert Association, and I am fully cognizant of the fact that I'm standing between a hungry mob and lunch. This is an unenviable spot to be on the agenda. I hope to be entertaining, educational, and brief. Thank you all for your attendance today. Oregon Natural Desert Association is focused on the southeast quadrant of our state, Oregon's quintessential high desert. And thank you, Adam, for introducing us to it. I am joined here by our talented, irrepressible campaign manager, Carly Foster. So after confusing you, confounding you, perhaps disappointing you with my presentation, come find her at our table inside, where you will get your questions answered and your hope restored as to how we can help to conserve Oregon's dry side. Oregon Natural Desert Association is based here in Bend, Oregon. We have offices in Portland as well. We are privileged to represent 14,000 members and supporters in Oregon and across the country. Also, we learned recently in Germany, France, and as far away as Greece. It's interesting as who signs on to your letters. Today, I'd like to visit with you just a bit about one of the 5 focal landscapes where Oregon Natural Desert Association works, the greater Hart-Sheldon. And again, thank you, Adam, coincidentally, for introducing this landscape to us. He has helped to lighten my load here today. The greater Hart-Sheldon is a landscape that is intact, somewhat functional. And so as part of a rewilding conference, it's an opportunity to elevate some things that are working on that landscape, resolving some problems, and providing for, in the long term, a biodiverse, climate-resilient ecosystem representative of what sagebrush steppe is supposed to look like. So here is the greater Hart-Sheldon. Out in the high desert, we do landscapes big. This is a 3.5 million acre landscape. 2.4 million acres of it are recognized by the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as being wilderness quality. So no roads, no mines, no other disturbances that would otherwise disqualify those areas for potential congressional designation as wilderness. We are at a rewilding conference. We've been talking about wildlife. Let me give you the stats. Adam introduced you. The signature species is sage grouse for this landscape. The cutest species is pygmy rabbit. Our migratory species is pronghorn. The game species everybody enjoys are mule deer. And the topmost carnivore running the show out there are mountain lions. There might be wolves wandering around out there. Come find me in the happy hour and I'll tell you more. But mountain lions are always going to run the show in Oregon's high desert. Okay. I realized after putting together my slides, I forgot to put pictures of the actual critters on the slides. So we are a map-crazed organization, and I'm going to process through a variety of maps here, but I will at least remind you what we're looking at before then eliminating them, so you can see the maps that we're so enthralled by at ONDA. The greater Hart-Sheldon is a migratory corridor for wildlife, and in the best sense of the term. Focus especially not only on the 2 cow-free, livestock-free, also horse-free refuges, Hart Mountain and Sheldon, the 2 green polygons on this landscape, but also the BLM lands in between. The Bureau of Land Management manages the vast majority of those connective lands between the 2 refuges, more than 400,000 acres, and therefore is principally responsible for how and whether those lands will be managed for the wildlife resources found there. This first slide is a reminder of, again, our migratory species of du jour. How many are on this landscape? Up to 8,000 counted across this landscape just a few years ago, but populations are declining and we're not quite sure why yet. That their migratory corridor, the area that they use throughout the year, is nearly 2 million acres on this landscape, and that the Bureau of Land Management is responsible for more than 60%, even including the refuges. The Bureau is the major landlord on this landscape for pronghorn and for other species. Where are we at? Sage grouse. I can't even see the screen, so I'm just going to postulate, make things up as we go here. Is Adam? Oh, it's right here. It's right here, everyone. Okay. Okay, so let's get rid of the sage grouse so we can see our map. Hey, this is helpful. Thank you. Okay. What did I say here? Okay. Sage grouse, signature species, indicator species, umbrella species. Unfortunately, even just in this region, 22% declined in 1 year from 2021 to 2022. And yet, more or nearly 3.5 million acres of this habitat of this region have been identified as critical core habitat for the species, or areas where proper management could continue to restore and provide better conditions for the species. Remember those cows that Adam showed you? 72% of this landscape administered by the Bureau of Land Management. So again, the Bureau is absolutely key to what happens for sage grouse on this landscape being representative of maybe the best way to manage sagebrush steppe, not just in Oregon, but throughout the Great Basin. Pygmy rabbit, brand new research. I wish I'd known about your petition. Brand new research identified the greater Hart-Sheldon is probably among the two most important core habitats for this species in the Great Basin. Pygmy rabbit primarily occur in the Great Basin, although you can find them in Utah and up into Wyoming, etc. And so it turns out that this landscape is not just important for landscape scale species like sage grouse, like pronghorn, but also pygmy rabbit. And again, Bureau of Land Management, really key role here as to whether and how this species will continue to persist on this landscape. Mule deer. Winter habitat, it turns out, is a bit of a constraining effect on this species. In fact, let me see if I can show you that. See where that mule deer is basically buried in sagebrush? That's their preferred winter habitat type right there, to be buried in sagebrush. And what this landscape provides actually are huge intact tracts of big sagebrush varieties, Wyoming big sagebrush, Basin big sagebrush, Mountain big sagebrush. And so it turns out that greater Hart-Sheldon, among other things, are important winter habitat for mule deer that arrive in winter and then leave during other times of the year. So again, species coming and going, traipsing back and forth, north and south, east and west. Even pygmy rabbit are kind of migratory. Again, find me in the happy hour, or Carly. We have good stories to tell on this. The Bureau of Land Management, 70% of this landscape, or where these winter habitats are found, are under the administration of the Bureau of Land Management. Okay. Despite the fact that this is an intact, connected, somewhat climate resilient, huge landscape still remaining for these species, all of which are suffering different demographic and habitat concerns. There are a variety of land uses that either occur today or may happen tomorrow that could upset and permanently alter both the character of this landscape, fragment and block migration and movement across this landscape, hinder its ability to become more climate resilient over the time, and reduce biodiversity at landscape scales. This is just a listing of some of them. But you might also look at this list and say, hey, wait a minute. The Bureau's responsible for all of these things, okay? So when they're doing management planning and when they're thinking about how best to administer multiple uses, even on a landscape like this one, these are the kinds of things that you would read in a management plan. We've all cracked open a management plan. Some of you then immediately slammed it and closed because you want nothing to do with that. But Adam and I look at this stuff all the time, and there are whole sections of plans that are dedicated to these impacts on landscapes, even like the greater Hart-Sheldon. Okay, so this is a landscape. I'm just going to jump back really quick. Let's just go here. This is a landscape that deserves special designation. Congressional, presidential, I'd even say administration, agency designation. Call it an NCA, National Conservation Area. Call it a national monument. Maybe even connect the two refuges, Hart and Sheldon, as FDR did in 1935 before local livestock interest intervened, and he changed his mind in 1936. At the very least, can we get an agency designation across this landscape, a gigantic area of critical environmental concern? These are all fun things to think about and talk about and have beer over later today. But ultimately, we also live in, and we've all heard this today, a challenging time politically. Agencies that are underfunded and are being pulled 1,000 different directions by dozens of different stakeholders who have different demands on these landscapes, resources, planning, et cetera, that the agency is responsible for. And so therefore, the likelihood of securing special designations for this landscapes may not be as great as doing some things just through the good old-fashioned administrative planning processes. Now, this is where I may lose you, I admit, and I apologize for that, but people like me live on this stuff, okay? Federal and state planning and policy making. I know, ooh, yes. There are, and this is unprecedented, in this region, perhaps in Eastern Oregon, 8 different planning and policy-making processes happening in the greater Hart-Sheldon right now. I've listed them. They are federal planning processes, federal policy-making, policy implementation, new instruction from Washington, D.C. about how best to manage these public lands and resources. They are also state planning processes, new state policies related to habitat connectivity and sage-grouse conservation, and all of them are landing on this landscape all at once right now. And so this is where somebody like me can get very excited about this stuff, and I appreciate the rest of you are already thinking about what's in the lunch boxes that I saw them prepare just over here on the table, and they do look delicious, thank you. All of these uses could be addressed in many of these different plans and policies. If I were just to overview them for you quickly. The Greater Sage-Grouse Conservation Plan Amendment could do things on mining, rights of way, off-road vehicle use, and other transportation planning, even livestock grazing. The Greater Sage-Grouse Mineral Withdrawal is an opportunity to eliminate the possibility of mining anywhere on this landscape for 20 years at a time. By the way, if you don't think that mining could possibly be an impact, because, hey, Mark, there's no mining down there now. You have 2.44 million acres of wilderness quality lands. Hang tight. There's always a mineral out there that somebody wants to dig for. Carly and I are busily fighting 5 different lithium mines on the border of Oregon and Nevada, 2 watersheds over that nobody saw coming 5 years ago. So there's always a mineral out there that somebody wants to develop. The Lakeview Resource Management Plan, an opportunity to elevate and secure protections for wilderness quality lands. The State Wildlife Action Plan. People underestimate how valuable a SWAP can be, a State Wildlife Action Plan. The states have to write the SWAPs in order to get huge sums of federal monies. And so they have to do it to a certain condition and status and degree. And so these are a real great opportunity on behalf of any species you're working on to elevate conservation for wildlife in state planning, because the states have got to develop a plan that you all support and endorse in order for the federal government to continue to write checks for them on an annual basis to implement those plans. State sage-grouse planning, state sage-grouse mapping. They're redoing their maps for sage-grouse and identifying the most important sage-grouse habitats. All of these things combined, and again, I appreciate that it's not as exciting as a designation like a National Conservation Area. Yes, I would like one of those, or even an ACEC or some other middling administrative designation. But these planning processes layered, somebody said pancakes earlier today. That's right, it was juvenile cougars. Okay. layered together, okay, stacked. This is 8 pancakes stacked, one on top of the other, maybe a ninth in the form of the BLM conservation rule, together could address every one of these impacts or potential impacts on this landscape and more or less quasi-permanently provide protection for the greater Hart-Sheldon. Thank you very much. Appreciate your attendance.